Learning how to communicate in a healthy way is an essential piece of our soul recovery journey. We're learning how to take our power back and that we can learn to be okay when the people and the situations around us aren't okay. And that we learn to speak with clarity, with compassion, and only when it is necessary. We're learning how to do the healing within ourselves to truly see our experience as our own. And today I'm going to be reading on the chapter about communication from How Al-Anon Works for Families and Friends of Alcoholics and reflecting on it in our soul recovery process. Welcome to the Recover Your Soul podcast, a spiritual path to a happy and healthy life. My name is Rev Rachel Harrison. I started Recover Your Soul after having profound changes in my life from my recovery of alcoholism, codependency, and control addiction. I was guided to share the tools and principles of spirituality and soul recovery to help others transform their lives as mine was transformed. For us to overcome external circumstances, we need to turn the attention to ourselves, focusing on our inner change and healing. Positive results in our lives will follow. Welcome back to Recover Your Soul. It's Rev Rachel, and I am so thankful that I get to spend this time with you here today. Thank you so much for continuing to show up, to do your own soul recovery, to connect to this beautiful community, and to learn how to be okay when the people and world around you is not okay. And as I record this particular episode, we have just gone through a presidential election, and it's brought up a lot of feelings for people. And I'm not actually going to talk specifically to that today, but I just want us to hold space. I want us to connect and remember that there is basic goodness everywhere. And no matter which side you are on, it's still complicated, because it's really brought so much division in our country and within our families. And that from a spiritual perspective, if we can remember to rise above and to witness, and that our healing, our light, our goodness, our kindness, our compassion to others will indeed not only change our family, not only change our own life, but will affect change in the world. So as we're in this complicated time, I just remind you to bring your soul recovery into your heart, connect to your higher power, and remember that we are all souls here having this crazy human experience at Earth School. And some of it is pretty darn complex, and to keep your head up, Okay. Today, I wanted to talk about communication, and I'm going to be reading out of How Al-Anon Works for Families and Friends of Alcoholics, Chapter 13 on communication. And my inspiration for this is something that is close to my heart. It was a post on our private Facebook group, the Soul Recovery Community, and it was a beautiful message from someone saying, "My husband just got back from rehab, and I'm wondering when is the appropriate time to share with him the harms that I feel, the hurt that I feel from what he did in his time of being drunk." And what I responded back was, "Ooh, that would be a great episode." And so I really want to use that as a reflection, because as we're doing our soul recovery, there is this piece that we're working on about how do I share what my experience has been in a healthy way. But I also wanted to use Al-Anon, which many of you are here because of your search for Al-Anon, as a reflection to go back and forth between that content and how I see it from the soul recovery perspective. So just knowing that that was the question, I'm going to read and then we'll reflect on it from there. Okay, this is reading out of How Al-Anon Works for Families and Friends of Alcoholics on page 94. Once we're able to take care of ourselves, we have much more to bring to the relationship with others. The way we relate to others depends in large part upon the way we communicate, so it's useful when examining our relationships to consider what we say and how we say it. For instance, do we say what we mean and mean what we say? Do we state our needs and desires or sit back and wait for others to read our minds? Do we agree to do things that we really don't want to do, saying yes when we really mean no? Do we express our feelings and communicate our appreciation for those in our lives, or do we keep silent and deny what we feel out of fear or habit? Just a little lead in, which I thought was really great. The first section is called Recognizing Old Patterns. And it says, many of us have formed patterns of communication that linger even though they may have outlived their usefulness. For example, before recovery, many of us kept quiet or agreed to unreasonable requests in order to avoid conflict. At the time, we lacked the ability to take a stand or act in our own behalf. Today, we might perpetuate that behavior out of habit, even though we have alternatives. We have other alternatives. What I love about this is that we're looking at patterns. Soul recovery is so much about having an awareness of the patterns that we're replaying over and over and over in our lives, and how those are formed by these core beliefs. So what I love about this is that we might be in a pattern, we might have a belief that we have to keep quiet, that we don't want to have any conflict, so we'll do anything we can to keep any conflict from happening. And when we start to recognize, like, oh, this is actually a pattern, and I'm starting to think and feel and believe differently, I can actually show up differently, then you're going to start to use the tools that you've been creating, that you've been working so hard on. And so what I love about this already is that communication is, it's so complicated really, because there's so many feelings that are attached to everything. And what we're learning in soul recovery is we're learning how to, again, as I said in the beginning, even thinking about the world, to lift up our perception just a little bit, to start to see things from just a little bit of a different perspective. And so when we begin to be safe within ourselves, safe in how we feel about ourselves, and we start to allow those old beliefs and patterns to release their energy, then we can show up as we need to. It says, now that we're working to improve our lives, we may want to stop making promises and threats that we can't carry out. For example, swearing that the alcoholic will have to leave if he or she takes another drink undermines our credibility if it's merely idle threats. In soul recovery, we're learning how to take our power back. We're learning that when we put everything that we feel on somebody else, our well-being on somebody else, and idle threats are very different than boundaries, for example. So this concept of us really starting to look at, am I just yelling something? Am I just saying something because I want it to be different? I want to have change, but the truth is I'm not actually going to do those things. We are undermining our credibility. So then when we try to have a boundary, they don't believe us. In recovery, we're learning that our words are powerful, that every single thing that we say has power, and that we should be clear when we say what we mean and mean what we say. The next section says, sometimes we may hesitate to speak out because we fear the consequence of doing so, yet we overlook the consequence we pay by keeping quiet. Such silence can perpetuate our frustration, reinforce our fear of conflict, and cause us to believe that what we have to say is really unimportant. In this way, we demonstrate a lack of respect for ourselves and for other people. All we have to offer to anyone is ourself. If we hold back timidly, refuse to take risks of being ourselves, we diminish our relationships. Okay, so then it says, however, if you're dealing with someone who's drunk or violent, any kind of communication really like this is ill-advised. So this is the part where I want to step into the conversation about when do we share what we felt, what happened to us with other people, because we are not trying to learn how to be quiet. We're actually trying to learn how to be more authentic in our communication. And when you work with me in soul recovery, either by doing the steps on your own in the programs, by working with coaching with me, or listening to these podcasts, what I hope that you start to understand is that your experience is so important. How it felt to you is really important, and that we're letting go of the blame and the belief that somebody else did something to us. Now, what I really want to impress upon is that most of us have been in situations that are incredibly difficult. And as I work on my memoir and the book for the new 9-step soul recovery process, I'm pouring back into my journals. and rereading so much of what I have worked really hard to heal within myself. And it's bringing up a lot of emotions around some very, very real, very painful memories of my husband when he was drinking, of me when I was drinking, of the kids when they were adolescents, and all of the incredibly difficult life that we went through together. So it isn't about dismissing those things. And recently, in my conversation with Rich, that has been kind of this overlying topic since August, one of the things that I said to him was I was still holding a resentment that he hadn't really taken responsibility for harm that I felt that he had caused me and my kids. And he looked at me really unsure what that meant. And that's what started this real intense feeling that he didn't understand where I was coming from, because I did have this part of me that wanted him to know how he had hurt me. Now, my soul recovered self, my self that can see above all that, knows that for me, 99.9% of the healing that happens within myself. That we do the work within ourselves to start to process how that felt for us. This is the new step 2 in soul recovery, where we're realizing that we're powerless over everything outside of ourselves. We're powerless over someone else's addiction. We're powerless over how they spoke to us. We're powerless over their actions. We're powerless over what was happening in their world. And that when we are trying to control and trying to be what I call on top of the rock, which is we have frustrations and resentments and anger, and we want it to be different. And we're just dancing all over the top of that rock where we actually are powerless. We're trying to make it be different. And in that is so much pain and frustration, and it is incredibly real. Are you ready to step into your soul recovery? Well, I am here to support you as your spiritual coach. Visit the website to book one-on-one coaching sessions with me as we transform your life through working the 9 steps of soul recovery. You can also choose to work the steps on your own through the modules at your own pace. I'm excited to also be announcing that there are retreats every year, both in Colorado and other places in the country, workshops and events. And I hope that you also will join us the first Monday of every month from 6 to 7 p.m. Mountain Standard Time for the free Zoom support group. This is an amazing place for us to connect, learn, and share our stories. And don't forget to join the private Facebook group for soul recovery, inspiration, connection, answering each other's questions, and giving shout outs. I thank you for supporting this podcast either by being a Patreon member, Apple Podcast subscriber, and getting that extra episode every Friday, or by your one-time donations or your small monthly donations that are found in the show notes. You are helping spread the soul recovery message and supporting this community. Visit the website recoveryoursoul.net for dates, times, everything that's happening, register for the support group, and how to stay connected. Together, we can do the work that will recover your soul. When I was in a situation where there was a healthy place to speak to Rich, and we went to counseling together, and we started having this conversation. And he actually was the one that said, I recognize that we have some safety issues with each other. We don't 100% trust each other. And I talked about that a little bit in one of the past episodes around money. But he was actually opening up the door for us to be honest that we don't trust each other on a much larger level. And it's true, because when you have been emotionally harmed by somebody over and over and over, your protectors put up barriers that keep you safe. And maybe that means that you don't talk. Maybe it actually means that you over talk. So the next section, so we'll continue to come back to what I'm talking about, but the next section says, then there's those of you who never hesitate to say what's on our minds. You don't stop to think about what we wish to convey or how best to say it. We just automatically spit out the words. Not everyone needs to know everything that comes into our minds, and some circumstances are not always suitable for personal discussion. Honestly, it's a great gift to give any relationship diplomacy and consideration for feelings of others, and the appropriateness of the situation are also important. Many of us benefit from learning the value of silence. Now, what I want to say is in soul recovery, it's not the value of silence, meaning that you just push it down into a dark cave of your soul, never to be thought of again. It means that you are having the value of working it out yourself in a healthy way, not holding on to resentment, not being in judgment, not thinking that somebody else is wrong, but starting to look at things from this place where we say, everything that I think is going through my filter of what I think. What is my perception here? Am I coming from a wounded place, or am I actually coming from a place where I have more health and more understanding of what I think and feel? Am I having consideration for the other person's experience, that they might be working really hard to have their own healing? And you know what's interesting? Most of us have so much of our own shame and guilt. The last thing that we need is someone else to be laying on layers and layers and layers more of judgment and shame and guilt. But you're not also releasing the experience that they're having in their healing as if it's a pass, right? So many of us feel like if I don't tell them all the things that they did, that I'm just giving them a pass for hurting me. Now, in deep spirituality, the concept is no one can make you feel any way. We feel those feelings. Well, it's pretty hard not to feel those feelings if someone is yelling at you or hurting you or lying to you or not showing up or not paying the bills or being deceiving or being violent or being checked out. There's a lot of very real things that are happening. So, of course, they're creating feelings within yourself. But if you want to be in a relationship where you actually work through the stuff, there is this ability to step back and to work on your experience, your healing, your ability to see the past in a new way that makes it so that they can actually release their own guilt, their shame, and decide that they want to heal. And then they can actually hear what you need to say. So in the argument that Rich and I had, where I'm, crying and I'm saying, I have resentment that you harmed us and you don't see it. And his defense posturing, of course, because that's what we do when we feel attacked, is we defend, said, I don't know what you're talking about. I've never intentionally harmed you or the kids. Now that's true. In his mind, he has never intentionally harmed us. His definition of harm would be hitting us or trying to do something horrendous out of malice. But when we went to our therapy session together and the words came out of my mouth, which the therapist brought back up and reminded me, where I said I need him to know how he harmed me, and he reflected that I used those words, which I was curious about how when I was in my pain body, those fell out of me even after all this work. I said, I am hurt because you were checked out, you were reactive, you were easily upset, and you chose alcohol over your family. And Rich softened and he looked at me and he said, you're right, I did do all those things. And he said, I didn't understand what you meant by harm. But if that's what you're saying, yes, I can take full responsibility for that. And that was really helpful to me, to have him actually reflect that he could hear those things. But it's interesting that even with everything that I've worked on, it was hard for me to pull the words out that had a level of awareness and my own experience that weren't attacking, that he could hear. And it took us being in an environment with somebody else. And then he reflected to me some of the things that he feels and the ways that I was that was hurtful and harmful to him. And I was able to reflect and hear him in that situation. And this is the part where, I've been doing this for almost 7 years. And this is the first time, like a month ago, where we sat down with somebody and the words got really clear and we had somebody holding space for us. Now, in that experience, the truth is that I have been doing a ton of work of releasing and letting go and having compassion for everybody involved, that sometimes the best somebody has to offer is not that great. The best that I had to offer often was not that great. And if I look at it from a soul recovery perspective, which is a human being who had his own pain, his own addiction issues, his own stories, his own beliefs, his own patterns, came from an addictive home, this was his way of being in the world and his way of trying to figure out how to take care of and fix our kids, right? So it doesn't mean that someone can continue to behave in those ways. Part of this journey that we're on, like last week's episode, which is this relationship providing a situation and an environment for everybody to heal and get better? And what does that look like? So this communication that's so interesting and these patterns, recognizing the patterns, is that, Rich and I didn't have parents who modeled this kind of healthy communication styles. We both came from divorced families, and I came from a mom that we had no conflict at all. And the truth is, part of the reason why I didn't have conflict is I didn't share anything that wasn't an opinion that she would already have. And you know what I did? I went and was very opinionated everywhere else, because that's where I could have some energy and some power. So much so that Rich feels like I get really rigid still to this day. We had a conversation yesterday where he's like, you still can be really rigid in your opinions. And I had to reflect and say, yeah, that's true. Well, we can't say those things to each other unless we're both feeling safe. And it's taken a lot of time for us to move into that place. But a huge piece of this for me has been to ask the question, why do I need to tell him how I felt about some situations when really I'm doing the work on myself to heal myself from those situations? Because the truth is, no matter how much work we do, he will always see it from his perception. He will always see it from how he experienced it, and how he experienced it was different than how I experienced it. And so it isn't about one person's way being the right way. It's really around having the ability to give space to be accepting of everyone's perception and experience of the story. Those of us who don't hesitate to tell the world everything that comes out of our mind, we need to cut back. We need to be curious about why that's our communication style. And those of us who clam right up and don't say anything, we need to learn that it's safe to share what we need and what we want. And that when we begin to heal, we can actually start to look at the situation around us and the people around us. And if somebody is continually going against our boundaries, continually speaking poorly to us, continually showing up in a way that is not safe, all of a sudden we can see it different. And then you start to make decisions that are right for you about how you're going to handle that. What does that look like for you? In each family, it's totally different. It says, we can communicate with faith and the ability of other people to solve their own problems rather than trying to do it for them. We can learn that sometimes it's best to keep our mouths shut. Now, this one is so important when you have people in your life who are trying to figure their stuff out, right? Like right now at this moment, Alex and his partner, I don't know if I've announced it on the podcast, but they are expecting a baby at the end of February in California. And I am so over the moon excited. And they are, well, Lexi's definitely sober and Alex is mostly sober. He's doing the California sober thing, which is, 80% sober. And I'm pretty happy about that. Bodhi is still completely sober, which I am over the moon about. And there's some actual real life stuff that's happening for both my kids in their lives, jobs and relationships and, all the stuff that's happening. And this healthy piece of communication, which means I don't not tell them what my experience is, or show up as a whole person to be of support to them, but I'm not trying to fix their problems. I don't hold on to the fear that everything's going to fall apart. I continue to see them as whole. I continue to see them as able. How are they supposed to fix their problems if they think that I don't think they can handle it? So this beauty of letting other people, having faith that other people can solve their problems rather than trying to fix it for them, means that we actually can show up in support in a way that is totally new. And it allows them to actually share more with us about what's going on because there's safety. It says, likewise, those who rarely have anything constructive or positive to say may have to be quiet until they find a more balanced way to talk to others. If the only attention we ever received was critical or negative, we may know no other way to relate to others. But such negativity is destructive. Gossip is equally destructive. Not only do we avoid focusing on ourselves when we gossip, but we disrespect others and its self-defeating attitudes about relationship. When we gossip, we create a judgmental and competitive atmosphere in which no one feels comfortable about being themselves or expressing feelings. Because gossip undermines Al-Anon's healing nature, it's considered one of the 3 obstacles to success in Al-Anon. Then it goes down to say, on the other hand, cold, angry silence can be more biting than any vicious words. What I love about this little part is just the reminder of how are we interacting with people? How are we showing up? What is the judgment? What is the gossip? Where are we benefiting our relationships and our own healing if we're on top of that rock with everybody else's business? So coming back to the Facebook post, which is, when do I talk to my husband about the harms that he caused me? The answer that I want to offer in this situation, and many of us who are still working through the pain of our lives, whether it's our childhood, our brothers and sisters, our parents, our friends, our family members, our kids, our spouses, there are absolutely painful and really heartbreaking situations that happen. However, they are done. And so it isn't about denying them, and it isn't about shoving them away and pretending they didn't happen, but it's also not about replaying the tapes and being in such a place of pain and suffering with that person that we can't be present with them with who they are today. And this is where I really come to my own family and my choice of how to be in relationship with my husband and my kids. Because going back and reading those journal entries, which are excruciating to read, to be honest, when I walk in the house, it is very difficult to not want to be in the energy that was the pain that was very real for me, because there was a lot happening. But the person who lives in my house today is a different person, and I am a different person. And the only person that I have control over is me and how I'm showing up and how I see it. And I cannot continue to punish Rich for behaviors that he did a long time ago, whether he recognizes them or has amended for them or apologizes for them or not. We need somebody else to apologize or to see it for us to heal. You're giving your power away. If we need them to recognize or see, we are asking potentially for something that we will never receive. Now, what I can tell you is that you may notice in your life, whether it's your spouse or a parent or siblings or all those people, right? They are either going to continue the behavior of who they were then. And if that's the case, then you become clear about what your boundaries are. If they are making efforts to grow or to change or to see and show up differently, allow them to do that. Be present with them showing up differently. Engage in your showing up differently. Change the patterns in which you are communicating. Come from a place of healing and wholeness. See the beauty of each of these souls working hard to move forward. And if they're not working hard to move forward, stop trying to do their work. They need to solve it for themselves. And sometimes that means that you close the door on those relationships. And emotionally, you work on yourself. One of the suggestions that I have for people is to write letters. Writing a letter to somebody, and there's two ways that you can write the letter. The first letter would be a letter where you actually want to share how it felt to you. You're writing a letter that allows you, not from a blaming, you're at fault place here, but from the place where you can actually interact from how it felt for you without needing them to understand your perception or your perspective or how it was for you. Recently, Rich came to me on his own after going to one of the therapy appointments, and he said, I recognize for the first time that my going off to the cabin for those 3 years when the boys were, I was pregnant with Bodhi, and then when Alex was a toddler, and then when Bodhi was a baby, that those were difficult years for you and that you felt abandoned by me. And I can see that now. I just was trying to be a provider and do something that I was really passionate about. I didn't understand how harmful it was to you. Wow. That came out of the blue, right? Just like brought me to tears to have him stand there and say, I can finally see how this was hard for you. He came up with that on his own. I had spewed those things to him in counseling sessions, all those counseling sessions where I just complained about him. I had had that in my mind that, as soon as he'd gone up there, he had checked into another level of his alcoholism and been checked out and came home a totally different person. I have a lot of woundedness around this particular situation. But what I find when I look into those journals, as painful as it is to look back at them, they actually were the place where I laid down a lot of this pain, where I spoke into the universe about how it felt for me. And as my journaling has changed and the letters that I write have changed, it's moved out of this blame, how dare they, why the hell isn't it the way that I want it to be, into a place of curiosity, into a place of compassion, into a place where I can slow my mind down enough to write the letter to say out loud, this is how I feel. This is how this was for me. Not you should have done this. Why did you do this to me? Who are you? Why? But this was my experience. And then the next letter that you write is a letter to yourself. It's a letter to yourself giving you what you need, giving yourself the recognition for how you feel, supporting yourself in your experience, and having your higher self show up for you to be ready to release and let go and forgive the past. And to understand that forgiveness is not about saying, okay, that this happened. It's about saying, I am done with the energy that this is holding in my body. Hey, it's Rev Rachel just jumping in. I'm editing this audio, and I was not clear that in this letter that you are writing to the person and also to yourself, these are letters that don't go to anyone. These are just for you. They're for your journal, for your own purpose of healing, and you can either keep them for reflection later, and sometimes it's very powerful to actually burn them and have a ritual of release. Okay, back to the episode. And then you allow people to be exactly where they are. And you're not holding on to a whole bunch of expectations and resentments and anger that they need to see or show up or make amends for. They are either showing up in their life right now in your life as a growing, healthier person or not. Are you showing up in your life as a healthier, more healed person or not? That's all that matters. And as you're working your soul recovery, as you're doing these 9 steps, as you're discovering your patterns, as you're letting go of control, as you're opening to a higher power, I'm not doing these in order, you're releasing your old patterns, you're embracing new beliefs, you can actually be in your life in a way that you could have never imagined, because all those old stories are gone. if I did not open these journals to be more curious and have more clarity to write this memoir to share with you as a preparation for the book, I really don't go back and think about these things because they only hurt me. They only re-traumatize me. The person that lives in my house is different now. My kids are different than they were with what they did when they were younger. I am different now. That's all that matters. But my healing myself means that I'm not shoving any of it down or holding on to the resentments or biting my tongue. It means that I'm being curious about what I think and feel and believe and how I can express and share those thoughts and feelings with the people in my life in healthy and compassionate and loving ways. And sometimes that means that I do all the work in my journal, that I do it with a friend who can hold space for me, that Rich and I do things in counseling together. And then you create a safe environment where you can start to have these tougher conversations from a place of compassion and healing for each other. Communication is not easy. And most of us were not given the tools of how to do it in a healthy way from our upbringings. So we're learning now. Today is a new day. Today is a day to start. You can always start fresh today. As always, a reminder that I am here to support you on your soul recovery journey, to work through these feelings with you. And also, new and updated, the new step 1, which is Ready for Awakening, Work the Step Yourself, is up and ready and available on the Recover Your Soul website. And I do offer couples coaching if you wanted to work with your partner. So just remember, I'm here. Until next time, namaste. Thank you for listening, and I hope that helps support your soul recovery process. I just wanted to give you a quick reminder that every Friday is the Recover Your Soul bonus podcast, and this is available both to Apple Podcast subscribers for $3.99 a month, or it's available for both free and paid Patreon members. So as a Patreon member, you can choose, do you want to support the podcast with $5, $10, or $25 a month? Totally volunteer, but to let you know that if you want to listen to those bonus episodes, incredible interviews, wonderful book studies, you don't have to be a paid member. You can access them in the first week or two that they're available free on Patreon. This community is so important to me, and I want you to know I treat it with love and consideration. If you want coaching, I'm here for you. You want to come to a retreat, I'm here for you. You want to come to the free Soul Recovery Support Group, the community is here for you. Watch us on Facebook, Instagram, follow us on all the social media for daily inspiration. Be part of the Facebook group. And one of the most important things is that you share this podcast with people that you think that it will resonate with, that you think that they're interested. Give it 5 stars, give it a review. We are growing this community together because together we can do the work that will recover your soul. The Recover Your Soul podcast and its content is for educational purposes only and is not allied or representative of any organizations or religions. It's based on the opinions and experience of Rev Rachel Harrison. Recover Your Soul claims no responsibility to any persons or entity for any liability, loss, damage, or cause alleged to be caused directly or indirectly as a result of its use. Applications or interpretations of the information represented herein. Take what you need and leave the rest.